I walked through my front door that Tuesday evening, carrying the cardboard box that held 15 years of my professional life, and found my son Tyler packing my belongings into milk crates. The termination letter from Consolidated Manufacturing still crinkled in my jacket pocket as I watched him fold my shirts with mechanical precision. When I asked to stay 1 month while I found new employment, Tyler looked up with eyes I barely recognized and said the words that shattered everything I thought I knew about my own child. "Dad, be out before the weekend. This house isn't for you." Standing in that living room, watching Tyler treat my possessions like garage sale rejects, I felt something crack inside my chest. This was the same boy who used to curl up on that very couch during thunderstorms, begging me to tell stories about brave knights and loyal fathers. Now he handled my reading glasses with the same indifference he might show to a stranger's belongings. The transformation had been gradual, like watching paint fade in sunlight. 6 months ago, Tyler would call twice a week just to check on my arthritis or remind me about doctor appointments. He brought groceries without being asked, and fixed the squeaky hinges that bothered me during quiet evenings. That Tyler had vanished somewhere between spring and summer, replaced by this cold young man who avoided eye contact when delivering ultimatums. I traced the change back to Jessica's arrival in March. She had moved in without any conversation, appearing one morning at my breakfast table like she owned the place. Tyler introduced her as his girlfriend, with a defensive edge in his voice that warned against questions. Jessica smiled with teeth too white and eyes too calculating, extending a manicured hand while already cataloging the value of my grandmother's china cabinet. The first red flag came during Easter dinner when Jessica casually mentioned how Tyler deserved his own space to grow as a man. She sprinkled these comments throughout conversations like seeds, always when Tyler was listening. During baseball games on television, she would sigh about how the house felt cramped with 3 adults. When I cooked dinner, she praised Tyler's independence while questioning whether he needed someone else making his meals. I found the text messages by accident while helping Tyler fix his phone's cracked screen. The conversation thread with Jessica stretched back months, filled with her complaints about my presence. "He treats you like a child instead of the man you are," one message read. Another said, "Successful men don't live with their fathers at 28. What will people think about your ambition?" Tyler's responses showed a gradual shift from defending me to agreeing with her assessments. "Dad does baby me sometimes," he had written in June. By July, his messages included phrases like, "I need my own space," and "maybe she's right about the independence thing." Jessica had been sculpting his thoughts with surgical precision, turning natural young adult desires for autonomy into resentment toward the father who had raised him alone since his mother's death. My investigation into Jessica's background revealed a pattern that chilled me to the bone. Patricia, my neighbor across the street, had noticed Jessica's expensive clothing and jewelry despite Tyler's modest income as a warehouse supervisor. Patricia's keen eye for detail, honed by 30 years as a bank loan officer, had cataloged Jessica's designer purses and luxury car payments that exceeded Tyler's monthly salary. The most disturbing discovery came through Tyler's college friends, who privately expressed concern about Jessica's influence. Marcus, Tyler's roommate from university, pulled me aside at a barbecue and whispered about Jessica's questions regarding my health, my age, and my financial planning. She had pumped Tyler's friends for information about our family history, always under the guise of caring concern for Tyler's future. Jessica had convinced Tyler that the house belonged to him through inheritance laws, filling his head with half-truths about property transfer and estate planning. She spoke with authority about legal matters that she clearly didn't understand, but her confidence swayed Tyler's inexperienced judgment. She painted me as an aging squatter in my own home, someone who had forgotten that the house naturally passed to the next generation. The manipulation reached its peak during their private conversations in Tyler's bedroom. Through thin walls, I overheard Jessica's coaching sessions where she rehearsed Tyler's confrontation with me. She taught him phrases designed to wound, coaching him to show no emotion when delivering the eviction notice. Her voice carried the patient tone of a teacher instructing a slow student in a particularly cruel lesson. That Tuesday evening, as I watched Tyler pack my life into boxes, I realized Jessica's plan had succeeded beyond her expectations. The son who once proudly introduced me to girlfriends as his hero now treated me like an unwelcome tenant. She had poisoned the well of our relationship so thoroughly that Tyler genuinely believed he was acting in his own best interest. The climactic moment came as I stood there processing my termination and my son's betrayal simultaneously. Tyler had stepped outside to load boxes into his truck when Jessica's phone rang in the kitchen. Her voice carried clearly through the open doorway as she spoke to someone with familiar intimacy. "Phase 1 complete," she said, her tone businesslike and satisfied. "The old man will be gone this weekend. Then we can move to Phase 2. Yes, I know exactly how much this place is worth." The assessment came back at $430,000. My blood turned to ice water as the pieces fell into place. This wasn't about Tyler's independence or my intrusion on young love. This was about money, property, and a scheme that I was only beginning to understand. Jessica had orchestrated my removal with the precision of someone who had done this before, and Tyler was nothing more than her unwitting accomplice in what I now recognized as a sophisticated theft operation. The next morning brought revelations that turned my stomach and clarified the scope of Jessica's deception. Patricia invited me for coffee on her front porch, positioning herself strategically to observe Jessica's movements while sharing intelligence she had been gathering for weeks. Patricia's suspicious nature, which I had always attributed to too much late-night television, suddenly seemed like prescient wisdom. "That girl has been busy," Patricia said, stirring sugar into her coffee with deliberate slowness. "3 different men in expensive suits visited your house while you were at work last month. They spent about an hour each time, taking pictures and making notes. Jessica met them at the door like she owned the place." Patricia's observations extended beyond mysterious visitors. Jessica's spending habits had caught the attention of several neighbors who noticed her frequent shopping trips despite Tyler's modest warehouse income. The Lexus in my driveway belonged to Jessica, not Tyler, and the monthly payments alone exceeded Tyler's entire salary. Patricia had done some investigating through her banking connections and discovered that Jessica was living well beyond any reasonable means. The financial web became clearer when I examined Tyler's mail more carefully. Hidden among the usual bills and advertisements, I found notices from 3 different lending companies regarding loan applications and credit checks. Tyler had been applying for loans using the house as collateral, apparently unaware that his name appeared nowhere on the property deed. My hands shook as I spread the documents across my kitchen table. Tyler had secured 3 separate loans, totaling $87,000 over the past 4 months. The money had been deposited into a joint account that Jessica had convinced him to open for their shared future expenses. According to the bank statements I found tucked behind Tyler's dresser, Jessica had been steadily transferring funds to accounts in her name only. The loan applications themselves revealed Jessica's coaching hand. Tyler's financial information had been inflated significantly, listing income and assets that existed only in Jessica's imagination. She had guided him through applications that painted a picture of a successful property owner with substantial equity and reliable income. The lending companies, eager for high-interest secured loans, had approved the applications without proper verification. Each loan carried devastating terms designed to trap borrowers in cycles of increasing debt. Interest rates ranged from 18 to 24%, with balloon payments scheduled to begin in 6 months. Jessica had timed everything perfectly, ensuring that Tyler would be unable to meet the payment obligations once the introductory periods expired. The most chilling discovery came in the form of a forged quitclaim deed that Jessica had created using online legal forms. The document, professionally printed and notarized by someone Jessica knew, transferred ownership of my house from me to Tyler. She had even gone to the trouble of backdating the deed to make it appear that the transfer had occurred 2 years earlier, shortly after Tyler's 26th birthday. Jessica's research into property law had been thorough but flawed. She understood enough about quitclaim deeds to create convincing forgeries, but she had missed crucial details about proper recording and the legal requirement for grantor signatures. The deed she had created looked official enough to fool Tyler and possibly even cursory examination by lending companies, but it would never survive serious legal scrutiny. My neighbor Patricia provided the final piece of the puzzle when she mentioned seeing Jessica with a real estate investor who had been buying distressed properties throughout our neighborhood. Charles Brennan specialized in acquiring homes through foreclosure auctions, often at fractions of their actual value. Patricia had noticed Jessica meeting with Brennan at a coffee shop downtown, their conversation animated and clearly conspiratorial. The plan became crystal clear as I connected these dots. Jessica intended to force me out of my own home while Tyler defaulted on the loans she had encouraged him to take. The foreclosure process would begin within months, triggered by Tyler's inevitable inability to meet the payment obligations. Brennan would be positioned to purchase the property at auction, having already negotiated terms with Jessica for a percentage of the profits. Tyler was nothing more than a pawn in an elaborate property theft scheme, his name on the loan documents, providing the legal foundation for stealing my house. Jessica had manipulated him into believing he owned property that she intended to sell out from under both of us. The cruelest aspect of her plan was that Tyler would be left with devastating debt and ruined credit, while Jessica disappeared with hundreds of thousands of dollars. The sophistication of the scheme suggested experience and planning that went far beyond a simple scam. Jessica had studied our family situation, identified vulnerabilities, and executed a plan that exploited both Tyler's naivety and my trust in my son's judgment. She had turned Tyler into an unwitting accomplice in his own financial destruction, while positioning herself to profit from our family's dissolution. Friday evening brought the shocking discovery that would change everything. While searching for documentation to prove my ownership, I found the forged quitclaim deed among Tyler's papers. The county records office had received the document for processing, but a clerical backlog had delayed its official recording. Jessica's plan was racing toward completion, with only bureaucratic inefficiency standing between my house and her theft scheme. The timeline suddenly became critical. If the forged deed became part of the official record, challenging Jessica's fraud would require expensive litigation that could take months or years to resolve. Tyler's loans would continue accruing interest and penalties, while legal proceedings dragged through an overburdened court system. Jessica had counted on this complexity to provide cover for her escape once the scheme reached its conclusion. Saturday morning arrived with the weight of accumulated betrayals pressing down on my shoulders like a physical burden. I had spent Friday night gathering documentation that proved my exclusive ownership of the house, preparing for a confrontation that would either save my family or destroy what remained of my relationship with Tyler. The original mortgage papers, refinancing documents, and property tax records told a story that Jessica had carefully hidden from my son. Tyler sat at the kitchen table, nursing coffee and avoiding my eyes when I spread the evidence before him. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, filled with years of shared memories that now felt fragile and threatened. Jessica had left early for what she called a shopping trip, but I suspected she was meeting with her accomplices to finalize whatever endgame she had planned. "Son, we need to talk about ownership," I said, my voice carrying the authority I had learned during Tyler's rebellious teenage years. "Look at these documents and tell me what you see." Tyler's eyes scanned the mortgage papers with growing confusion. His name appeared nowhere on the original loan documents from 15 years ago, when he had been a 13-year-old boy more interested in baseball cards than real estate. The signatures were mine alone, witnessed and notarized according to proper legal procedures that Jessica's forgery could never replicate. The refinancing documents told an even more devastating story. I had mortgaged the house twice to pay for Tyler's college education and the business startup loan he had requested 3 years ago. Tyler's eyes widened as he read the loan purposes clearly stated in banking language. Educational expenses for dependent son and business investment loan for family member. "I worked double shifts for 5 years to pay for your education," I said, watching Tyler's face crumble as the truth penetrated Jessica's carefully constructed lies. 60-hour weeks at the plant, overtime every weekend, extra shifts during holidays when other fathers were home with their families. "I never told you because I wanted you to focus on your studies, not worry about the sacrifice." Tyler's hands trembled as he read his grandmother's will, which had left her entire estate to me with specific instructions that the inheritance would eventually pass to Tyler upon my death. The will contained no provisions for early transfer, and certainly no recognition of Jessica's existence in our family structure. Tyler had been convinced that inheritance laws automatically transferred property to adult children, a fiction that Jessica had carefully nurtured. The property tax records provided the most damning evidence against Jessica's deception. My name appeared as sole owner on every annual assessment, with payments made from my personal checking account. Tyler had never paid property taxes, insurance, or utilities on a house he believed he owned. Jessica had convinced him that these payments were simply my contribution as a grateful guest in his home. "Jessica told me you were just helping out with expenses," Tyler whispered, his voice breaking with the weight of realized deception. "She said inheritance laws made the house mine automatically when I turned 25. She showed me websites that explained property transfer to children. I pulled up the websites Jessica had shown Tyler, revealing their nature as legal advice mills designed to sell services to desperate people facing foreclosure or debt problems. The information was deliberately misleading, designed to convince readers that complex legal processes were simpler than they actually were. Jessica had used Tyler's trust and inexperience to sell him a fantasy that served only her financial interests. The loan documents that Tyler had signed revealed the extent of his manipulation. Jessica had coached him through applications that listed income he didn't earn and assets he didn't own. She had convinced him to inflate his financial statements by claiming that property ownership made him a qualified borrower despite his modest warehouse salary. "She said the loans were against my equity," Tyler said, tears streaming down his cheeks as he read the predatory terms he had agreed to. "She said I was just accessing money that already belonged to me. She said it was smart financial planning." The joint bank account statements showed how Jessica had systematically drained the loan proceeds into accounts that Tyler couldn't access. She had convinced him that moving money into her name provided tax advantages and protection from creditors. Tyler had signed transfer documents without understanding that he was giving away his only means of repaying the devastating loans Jessica had encouraged him to take. Tyler's emotional breakdown came when he realized the scope of Jessica's betrayal. She had isolated him from friends who might have questioned her financial advice, coached him to distrust my guidance as outdated thinking, and filled his head with dreams of wealth and independence that existed only in her imagination. Tyler had become a stranger to himself, adopting Jessica's values and abandoning the principles I had taught him during childhood. "Dad, I'm so sorry," Tyler sobbed, his voice cracking like a young boy's despite his 28 years. "I believed everything she told me. I thought you were holding me back, keeping me from becoming successful. I thought the house was mine, and you were just too proud to admit it." The moment of reconciliation felt fragile and precious, like handling butterfly wings after a storm. Tyler's apology carried the weight of genuine remorse, but I knew that Jessica's return would test his newfound understanding. She had spent months poisoning his mind against me, and rebuilding trust would require more than one conversation and a pile of documents. Our reunion was shattered by the sound of a sheriff's deputy knocking on my front door. Tyler's face went white as we heard Jessica's voice explaining to the officer that she had serious concerns about elder abuse and needed assistance removing a dangerous family member from the premises. She had returned with legal reinforcement, carrying a restraining order that would separate Tyler and me at the moment when we had finally begun to heal our fractured relationship. The deputy, a young man who clearly felt uncomfortable with the domestic situation, read the restraining order with professional detachment. The document accused me of financial abuse, threatening behavior, and psychological manipulation of my adult son. Jessica had painted a picture of an unstable elderly man who posed a danger to Tyler's safety and well-being. "Sir, I'm going to need you to gather some personal items and leave the premises immediately," the deputy said, his training overriding any personal judgment about the situation's validity. "You cannot return to this address or contact your son while this order is in effect. The hearing is scheduled for next Wednesday." Tyler started to protest, but Jessica's sharp look silenced him immediately. She had spent months training him to defer to her judgment, and the habit was stronger than his newfound understanding of her deception. Jessica's timing had been perfect, striking at the moment when Tyler was most vulnerable to my influence and most likely to expose her scheme. As I packed a suitcase under the deputy's supervision, Jessica's satisfied smile confirmed what I had already suspected. This had been her plan all along, using the legal system to separate Tyler and me while she completed whatever final phase of theft she had prepared. The restraining order would keep me away while she convinced Tyler that my documentation was forged and my claims were the desperate lies of an aging man facing eviction. The deputy escorted me to my truck, his expression suggesting sympathy that his position prevented him from expressing. Tyler watched from the kitchen window, his face torn between confusion and the lingering effects of Jessica's psychological manipulation. Jessica stood behind him, her hand possessively on his shoulder, already working to repair the damage that our conversation had inflicted on her carefully constructed lies. The Riverside Motel sat on the industrial side of town, wedged between a truck stop and a salvage yard that specialized in extracting value from things that appeared worthless. My room smelled of disinfectant and broken dreams, furnished with furniture that had surrendered to years of temporary residence and forgotten hopes. The irony wasn't lost on me that I had become homeless in the town where I had lived for 67 years, exiled from the house I had built and paid for through decades of honest work. Harold Patterson, my family lawyer since Tyler's childhood, arrived at the motel Tuesday morning, carrying a briefcase full of troubling revelations about Jessica's legal strategy. Harold had aged gracefully into his 70s, his white hair and careful manner inspiring confidence in clients who needed steady guidance through life's complications. His expression, however, carried worry lines that suggested Jessica's scheme was more sophisticated than either of us had initially realized. "Maynard, this restraining order is just the beginning," Harold said, spreading documents across the motel room's scarred table. "She's filed for emergency guardianship based on claims that you're suffering from dementia and pose a financial danger to Tyler. The petition includes affidavits from people I've never heard of, claiming they witnessed erratic behavior and financial abuse." The guardianship petition painted a picture of an elderly man whose mental faculties had deteriorated to the point where he could no longer manage his own affairs. Jessica had found people willing to swear that they had observed me making irrational financial decisions, forgetting important appointments, and displaying aggressive behavior toward Tyler. The signatures looked legitimate, but Harold's investigation revealed that the witnesses were strangers with no knowledge of our family situation. "She's also accelerated the timeline on Tyler's loans," Harold continued, his voice heavy with concern. "The balloon payments have been moved up to next month, creating an immediate crisis that will force foreclosure proceedings. Jessica has convinced Tyler that selling the house is their only option, and she's already identified a buyer willing to close within 2 weeks. The buyer, as I had suspected, was Charles Brennan, the real estate investor who specialized in distressed property acquisitions. Harold had researched Brennan's business practices and found a pattern of purchasing homes at significantly below market value, often from desperate families facing foreclosure. Brennan's involvement confirmed that Jessica's plan had been coordinated with professional criminals who understood the legal system's vulnerabilities. Jessica's sophistication became even more apparent when Harold revealed her previous victims. Working through his network of legal contacts, Harold had discovered 2 similar cases in Oregon and Nevada, where elderly homeowners had lost their properties through schemes that matched Jessica's current operation perfectly. In each case, she had targeted families where adult children lived in parents' homes, using manipulation and forged documents to steal properties worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. "Her real name is Jennifer Walsh," Harold said, sliding a criminal background report across the table. "She's wanted by the FBI for interstate fraud and has been operating under assumed identities for the past 3 years. The Jessica Morgan that Tyler knows doesn't exist in any official records prior to 18 months ago." The FBI report detailed Jennifer's methods, which followed a precise pattern that I now recognized in her relationship with Tyler. She identified vulnerable families through public records, researching property values and family structures to select optimal targets. Her preference was for widowed fathers with adult sons who lived at home, situations that provided emotional leverage and legal complexity that confused local law enforcement. Tyler's isolation had been carefully orchestrated from the moment Jessica entered his life. She had systematically separated him from friends who might question her financial advice, convinced him to avoid family gatherings where relatives might notice changes in his behavior, and filled his schedule with activities that prevented meaningful relationships outside their controlling dynamic. Tyler had become dependent on Jessica's approval and guidance in all aspects of his life. The restraining order served multiple purposes beyond simply removing me from the scene. It created legal justification for Jessica to act as Tyler's primary support system while painting me as an unstable influence who posed a danger to his well-being. The elder abuse allegations would make any future legal challenge more difficult, as courts tend to err on the side of caution when protecting vulnerable adults from family manipulation. Harold's investigation revealed that Jessica had been planning this phase of her operation for months. The witnesses who signed affidavits against me had been recruited through online classified advertisements, seeking people willing to provide testimony in domestic disputes. They were paid small amounts to sign statements they didn't understand, their signatures legitimizing Jessica's claims about my mental state and behavior. The financial timeline was racing toward disaster. Tyler's loans were structured to become unmanageable within weeks, forcing an immediate crisis that would prevent careful consideration of alternatives. Jessica had convinced Tyler that selling to Brennan was their only option, even though the proposed purchase price was $60,000 below the property's assessed value. She had created a false emergency that justified accepting a devastating financial loss. Wednesday brought the most disturbing revelation of all. Tyler had called Harold's office, his voice shaking with confusion and fear as he described Jessica's increasingly controlling behavior. She had taken possession of his phone to prevent him from contacting anyone without her supervision. She had convinced him to call in sick to work, claiming that stress from family conflict was affecting his health. Tyler was essentially under house arrest in his own home, isolated from anyone who might help him understand his situation. "Tyler's starting to see through her lies," Harold said, his voice carrying cautious optimism. "But she's got him convinced that you're dangerous, and that I'm part of some conspiracy to steal his property. She's also told him that the FBI investigation is a fabrication designed to discredit her because she discovered financial irregularities in your accounts." Jessica's counter-narrative painted me as a desperate elderly man who had been stealing from Tyler for years, using his trust to fund my own lifestyle, while claiming ownership of property that legally belonged to my son. She had convinced Tyler that Harold was complicit in this theft, using his legal expertise to create fraudulent documents that supported my false claims of ownership. The psychological manipulation had reached levels that bordered on brainwashing. Jessica controlled every source of information that Tyler received, filtering news and communication to support her version of reality. She had convinced him that his own memories of our relationship were unreliable, that his affection for me was the result of years of psychological manipulation that had begun in childhood. Thursday evening brought the phone call that changed everything. Harold had contacted his former partner, who now worked with the FBI's white-collar crime division, triggering an investigation that would expose Jessica's true identity and criminal history. Special Agent Sarah Campbell had been tracking Jennifer Walsh across 3 states, building a case that could finally put her sophisticated fraud operation out of business permanently. The breakthrough came when Agent Campbell connected Tyler's situation to her ongoing investigation. Jennifer had made the mistake of using the same bank routing numbers and contact information that linked her to previous frauds. The FBI had been monitoring these accounts, waiting for Jennifer to surface with another scheme that would provide sufficient evidence for federal prosecution. "We've been building this case for 2 years," Agent Campbell explained during her motel room briefing. "Jennifer Walsh is responsible for stealing over $2 million from elderly homeowners across the western United States. Your situation gives us the opportunity to catch her in the act and put her away for a very long time." The FBI's plan required my cooperation in gathering evidence that would expose Jennifer's scheme while protecting Tyler from both financial and criminal liability. Agent Campbell explained that Tyler was considered a victim rather than an accomplice, his manipulation by a sophisticated criminal absolving him of responsibility for the fraud that had been committed in his name. Friday morning brought the phone call from Tyler that I had been praying for. His voice was barely a whisper as he explained that he had discovered Jessica searching through my personal belongings and family photographs, looking for something that had nothing to do with their relationship or his supposed property ownership. Tyler's protective instincts toward our family's private memories had finally overcome Jessica's psychological control. "Dad, I think you were right about her," Tyler said, his words carrying the weight of painful realization. "Something's not right here. She's not the person I thought she was, and I need to know the truth about everything. Can you help me figure out what's really happening?" The moment had arrived when Tyler's own judgment finally reasserted itself against months of manipulation and lies. His request for help represented more than just doubt about Jessica's motives. It was an acknowledgement that our father-son relationship contained truth and value that her deception couldn't destroy. Tyler was ready to hear evidence that would shatter the false reality Jessica had constructed around him. The coordination between Harold, Agent Campbell, and myself felt like planning a military operation designed to rescue a prisoner of war. Tyler's phone call had provided the opening we needed, but Jennifer's suspicion was growing as her timeline approached its critical phase. She had noticed Tyler's changing mood and was implementing increased surveillance and control measures that made communication dangerous for everyone involved. Agent Campbell's team had been monitoring Jennifer's electronic communications, discovering a network of accomplices that extended far beyond Charles Brennan's real estate operation. Jennifer was part of an organized crime syndicate that specialized in property fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse across multiple states. Tyler's case represented one small piece of a much larger criminal enterprise that the FBI had been working to dismantle for years. "We need your son to cooperate, but we can't approach him directly while the restraining order is in effect," Agent Campbell explained during our clandestine meeting at a diner outside town. "Jennifer has him convinced that any law enforcement contact is part of the conspiracy against him. We need him to discover the truth on his own terms, in a way that feels like his own investigation rather than outside manipulation." The solution came through Harold's creative interpretation of legal ethics and family law. Tyler had the right to consult with independent legal counsel regarding his loan obligations and property ownership questions. Harold arranged for Tyler to meet with a colleague who specialized in real estate fraud, ostensibly to confirm his ownership rights and understand his financial obligations. Attorney Rebecca Stone had worked with the FBI on previous elder fraud cases and understood how to present information in ways that would penetrate Jennifer's psychological manipulation. Her meeting with Tyler was scheduled under the pretense of helping him understand his legal position as a property owner facing foreclosure pressure. Jennifer agreed to the meeting because she believed Tyler's consultation would confirm her lies about his ownership status. Tyler's session with Attorney Stone lasted 3 hours and shattered every lie Jennifer had carefully constructed over the previous months. Stone presented Tyler with authentic legal documents that proved my exclusive ownership, explained the fraud elements in his loan applications, and demonstrated how the forged quitclaim deed violated multiple federal and state laws. Most importantly, she helped Tyler understand that he was a victim rather than a willing participant in the scheme that was destroying our family. "Your father never gave you this house," Stone explained with gentle firmness. "The documents Jessica showed you were forgeries designed to convince you that you owned property you could use as collateral for loans. She used your trust and inexperience to commit fraud in your name, making you liable for debts you can never repay while stealing the proceeds for herself." Tyler's emotional breakdown in Stone's office marked the beginning of his liberation from Jennifer's psychological control. For the first time in months, he was hearing truth from someone who had no personal interest in the outcome beyond protecting him from criminal liability. Stone's professional demeanor and legal expertise provided credibility that Jennifer's manipulative charm couldn't undermine. The revelation that hit Tyler hardest was understanding how thoroughly Jennifer had isolated him from reality. She had controlled his access to information, filtered his social interactions, and gradually replaced his natural judgment with dependence on her guidance. Tyler realized that he had stopped thinking for himself months ago, accepting Jennifer's interpretation of everything from family relationships to financial planning. Stone provided Tyler with copies of Jennifer's criminal background report, including photographs and aliases that proved Jessica Morgan was a fabricated identity. Tyler stared at the FBI wanted poster featuring the woman he had believed he loved, her real name, and criminal history, destroying his ability to maintain any illusions about her motives or character. "She targeted you specifically because of your family situation," Stone explained. "Widowed fathers with adult sons represent optimal conditions for this type of fraud. She researched your family for weeks before engineering that first meeting, learning everything about your vulnerabilities and your father's assets before approaching you with a carefully crafted romantic persona." Tyler's cooperation with the FBI investigation began immediately after his meeting with Stone. Agent Campbell equipped him with recording devices and coached him on techniques for gathering evidence without arousing Jennifer's suspicion. Tyler's insider position would provide the FBI with direct evidence of Jennifer's criminal statements and actions, testimony that would be crucial for federal prosecution. The emotional challenge for Tyler was maintaining normal behavior with Jennifer while secretly gathering evidence of her crimes. Agent Campbell's psychological training helped Tyler understand that Jennifer's affection had always been performance rather than genuine emotion, making it easier for him to reciprocate her deception while protecting himself from further manipulation. Jennifer's increasing paranoia worked in our favor, as her controlling behavior became so obvious that even Tyler's manipulated perspective recognized it as abnormal. She had begun monitoring his phone calls, controlling his access to mail, and questioning him about conversations with neighbors or coworkers. Her behavior was escalating toward total isolation and control that would have made Tyler a virtual prisoner in his own home. The first recorded conversation captured Jennifer discussing property sale details with Charles Brennan, confirming that she had already negotiated terms for selling my house without Tyler's knowledge or consent. Jennifer spoke about the sale as a completed transaction, revealing that she had been planning Tyler's financial destruction from the beginning of their relationship. "The old man will be locked up by next week," Jennifer told Brennan during their recorded phone conversation. "Tyler's convinced that his father is mentally unstable and dangerous. Once the guardianship hearing goes our way, we can complete the sale and transfer the money offshore before anyone realizes what happened." Tyler's shock at hearing Jennifer discuss our family's destruction with casual indifference completed his emotional separation from her influence. The woman he had believed loved him was discussing my imprisonment and our family's financial ruin like a business transaction, showing no empathy for the human cost of her criminal scheme. The recording equipment also captured Jennifer's conversations with her accomplices in the witness fraud that supported the restraining order. Tyler learned that the people who had signed affidavits claiming to witness my erratic behavior had never met me and were paid through online classified advertisements seeking false testimony. Jennifer's coordination of perjury was captured in detail, providing federal prosecutors with evidence of obstruction of justice charges. Jennifer's mistake was underestimating Tyler's intelligence and capacity for independent thought. Her psychological manipulation had been effective because she had convinced Tyler to stop questioning her guidance, but once he began investigating independently, the lies became obvious and unsustainable. Tyler's natural skepticism and analytical skills, traits I had encouraged throughout his childhood, finally reasserted themselves against her control. The psychological turning point came when Tyler discovered Jennifer searching through our family photographs, looking for documents or information that had nothing to do with property ownership or financial planning. Her violation of our family's private memories triggered protective instincts that overcame her romantic manipulation, reminding Tyler that some relationships and values were more important than the false promises she had offered. Friday evening brought the crucial recorded conversation that would provide the FBI with everything they needed for Jennifer's arrest. Tyler had arranged for Jennifer to meet with Brennan at our house, ostensibly to finalize sale details, while FBI agents monitored from nearby locations. Jennifer's confidence in her scheme's success made her careless about operational security, assuming that Tyler's cooperation was guaranteed and that my removal had eliminated all threats to her operation. The recording captured Jennifer's complete admission of her criminal scheme, including details about forged documents, witness fraud, loan application deception, and planned money laundering through offshore accounts. She described Tyler as a useful fool who had served his purpose and would be discarded once the property sale was completed, revealing the depth of her manipulation and the cruelty of her intentions. Tyler's final conversation with me before Jennifer's arrest carried emotions too complex for simple words. His apology included grief for lost time, shame for his betrayal, gratitude for my patience, and determination to repair our relationship despite the damage that Jennifer's manipulation had caused. Our phone conversation, monitored by FBI agents for security purposes, marked the end of Tyler's isolation and the beginning of our family's recovery. Monday morning arrived with the weight of accumulated justice pressing down on Jennifer's carefully constructed lies like an avalanche that had been building for months. The FBI surveillance team had positioned themselves around the property, while Tyler prepared for the confrontation that would either expose Jennifer's crimes or confirm her suspicions about the investigation that was closing in around DeCossand. Her operation. Tyler's nervousness was understandable but controlled, his newfound understanding of Jennifer's true nature providing strength that her psychological manipulation could no longer undermine. Agent Campbell had coached him through techniques for managing stress while maintaining operational security, emphasizing that Jennifer's criminal experience made her dangerous when cornered or threatened. The morning began with Jennifer's routine check of Tyler's communications and schedule, her controlling behavior now obvious to Tyler, despite months of conditioning that had made her surveillance seem like caring attention. Tyler submitted to her inspection while internally cataloging the criminal violations that Agent Campbell had taught him to recognize in her actions. Jennifer's mood was optimistic as she prepared for what she believed would be the final phase of her operation. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for Wednesday, with Jennifer confident that her falsified evidence would result in my permanent removal and possible commitment to psychiatric care. She had spent weeks coaching Tyler to provide testimony that would support her elder abuse allegations. After Wednesday, everything will be different, Jennifer told Tyler over breakfast, her voice carrying satisfaction that made Tyler's skin crawl with new understanding. Your father won't be able to interfere with your property decisions anymore. We can sell this place to Brennan and start our new life with enough money to buy something really special. Tyler's recording equipment captured Jennifer's admission that she viewed my potential imprisonment as a positive development, revealing the callousness that her romantic facade had hidden from his inexperienced judgment. Her casual discussion of my suffering demonstrated that Tyler had never been in a relationship with a normal person who was capable of genuine human empathy. Charles Brennan arrived at 11 o'clock sharp, carrying a briefcase full of purchase documents that would transfer my property to his investment company for 60% of its assessed value. Brennan's appearance matched Agent Campbell's description of a predatory businessman who specialized in acquiring distressed properties from desperate families facing financial emergencies. The recorded conversation between Jennifer and Brennan revealed the sophisticated coordination that made their fraud operation so effective. Brennan had been monitoring Tyler's loan payments from the beginning, timing his purchase offer to coincide with the balloon payment crisis that Jennifer had engineered through her manipulation of Tyler's financial decisions. The kid still thinks he owns this place, Brennan said with amusement that made Tyler's blood boil. Jennifer's done excellent work convincing him that selling to me is his only option. He has no idea that the deed transfer was forged or that the loans were predatory from the beginning. Jennifer's response confirmed every detail that Agent Campbell had suspected about her criminal methodology. She described Tyler as one of her easiest marks, someone whose trust and inexperience had made him vulnerable to manipulation that more sophisticated targets would have recognized immediately. Tyler's father was the real challenge, Jennifer explained while Tyler listened through hidden speakers that FBI technicians had installed overnight. The old man had enough legal knowledge to expose the whole operation if he had been allowed to examine the documents carefully. Separating them was essential for maintaining Tyler's cooperation. The conversation revealed Jennifer's timeline for disappearing with the proceeds from the property sale. She planned to remain with Tyler only long enough to complete the transaction and transfer funds to offshore accounts that Brennan's organization had established. Tyler would be abandoned with devastating debt and ruined credit, while Jennifer assumed a new identity in another state where she would select her next victim. Tyler's psychological preparation was tested when Jennifer began discussing the false testimony she had coached him to provide at Wednesday's hearing. She reviewed the lies about my mental state and behavior, reminding Tyler to appear emotional and concerned when describing the elder abuse that existed only in her fabricated narrative. "Remember, you're protecting yourself from a dangerous old man who has been stealing from you for years," Jennifer coached, her voice carrying the patient authority that had once seemed like loving guidance. "The judge needs to see that you're brave enough to stand up to your father's manipulation and take control of your own life." Tyler's breaking point came when Jennifer handed him a script she had written for his testimony, complete with specific phrases designed to convince the judge that I posed a continuing threat to his safety and financial well-being. Reading his own words describing me as mentally unstable and potentially violent triggered rage that overcame months of psychological conditioning. "I'm not going to lie about my father in court," Tyler said, his voice carrying newfound strength that surprised both Jennifer and the FBI agents monitoring the conversation. "He's never hurt me or stolen from me, and I won't destroy his reputation to help you steal his house." Jennifer's mask dropped completely as she realized that Tyler's cooperation could no longer be assumed. Her voice turned cold and threatening as she reminded Tyler of his financial obligations and legal vulnerabilities, painting a picture of criminal liability that would result from refusing to support her version of events. "You signed those loan documents willingly," Jennifer snarled, her romantic persona evaporating to reveal the criminal predator beneath. "You'll be held responsible for fraud if you try to claim you didn't understand what you were doing. Your only protection is proving that your father manipulated you into making those financial decisions." Tyler's response demonstrated that Agent Campbell's coaching had prepared him for this moment of intimidation. Instead of capitulating to Jennifer's threats, Tyler calmly informed her that he had consulted with independent legal counsel and understood his rights as a fraud victim rather than a willing participant in criminal activity. Jennifer's desperation led to increasingly aggressive tactics as she realized that her control over Tyler was disintegrating. She threatened to claim domestic violence if Tyler refused to cooperate, describing false injuries that she could inflict on herself to support criminal charges that would destroy Tyler's reputation and career prospects. "You'll never work in this town again if I tell people what kind of man you really are," Jennifer threatened, her voice carrying venom that Tyler had never heard during their months together. "I'll destroy your reputation the same way I'm destroying your father's, if you don't do exactly what I tell you." Tyler's final recorded statement provided the FBI with everything they needed to arrest Jennifer for extortion, witness intimidation, and criminal threats. His calm rejection of her intimidation tactics demonstrated that her psychological control had been broken completely, leaving her with no influence over the man she had spent months manipulating. The FBI arrest team moved in as Jennifer realized that Tyler's defiance represented more than simple rebellion against her authority. Agent Campbell's voice over the loudspeaker identified law enforcement presence and ordered Jennifer to surrender peacefully, ending her criminal operation at the moment when she had believed success was guaranteed. Jennifer's final desperate gambit was claiming pregnancy in an attempt to manipulate Tyler's emotions one last time. Her tearful performance about their unborn child represented the ultimate test of Tyler's liberation from her psychological control, appealing to protective instincts that she had been exploiting throughout their relationship. Tyler's response crushed Jennifer's last hope of maintaining any influence over his decisions. His calm observation that her pregnancy claim was medically impossible, given evidence that Agent Campbell had provided about her previous hysterectomy, demonstrated that Tyler was finally thinking clearly about Jennifer's capacity for deception. Charles Brennan's arrest followed immediately, his briefcase full of fraudulent purchase documents, providing additional evidence of the organized criminal conspiracy that had targeted our family. The FBI had captured the entire operation in real time, gathering evidence that would support federal prosecutions carrying decades in prison. The restraining order was dismissed immediately when Jennifer's perjury was exposed, allowing me to return home for the first time in over a week. Tyler's emotional reunion with me marked the end of Jennifer's influence over our family and the beginning of our recovery from months of manipulation and betrayal. Agent Campbell's final briefing revealed the scope of Jennifer's criminal career, including details about previous victims and the sophisticated network of accomplices that made her fraud operations so effective. Tyler's cooperation had provided the breakthrough that law enforcement needed to dismantle an organization responsible for stealing millions of dollars from elderly homeowners across multiple states. The arrest scene ended with Jennifer being led away in handcuffs while Tyler stood beside me on the porch of the house that had always been our family home. Her shouted threats and accusations fell on deaf ears as Tyler finally understood that everything she had ever told him was designed to serve her criminal purposes rather than their relationship or his personal interests. The weeks following Jennifer's arrest felt like emerging from a long tunnel into sunlight that I had almost forgotten existed. Tyler and I moved carefully around each other at first, both of us wounded by months of manipulation that had turned us into strangers sharing the same address. Healing required patience and deliberate effort to rebuild trust that Jennifer had systematically destroyed through her psychological warfare against our family. Tyler's shame was almost harder to bear than the betrayal itself. He spent hours apologizing for believing Jennifer's lies, for treating me with cruelty that went against everything his mother had taught him about family loyalty and respect. His remorse was genuine, but painful to witness, a constant reminder of how thoroughly Jennifer had corrupted his natural judgment and compassion. "Dad, I said things to you that I can never take back," Tyler confessed during one of our long evening conversations on the front porch. "I treated you like a stranger, instead of the man who raised me alone after Mom died. I don't know how to live with what I did to you." The path forward required forgiveness that went deeper than simple words or gestures. Tyler needed to understand that Jennifer's manipulation wasn't his fault, that sophisticated criminals like her specialized in exploiting trust and inexperience in ways that even intelligent people couldn't recognize until it was almost too late. His victimization by a professional predator didn't diminish his value as a son or his capacity for growth and wisdom. My own healing process involved accepting that I had failed to protect Tyler from dangers I hadn't recognized or understood. Jennifer's initial approach had seemed like normal romantic interest from a young woman attracted to Tyler's kindness and stability. I had welcomed her into our home without suspecting that her charm masked criminal intentions that would nearly destroy our family's foundation. The financial recovery took months of careful work with Harold and the FBI's asset recovery team. Tyler's fraudulent loans were voided. Once prosecutors proved that Jennifer had manipulated him into signing documents he didn't understand, but the legal process required extensive documentation and testimony that forced us to relive the trauma repeatedly. Tyler insisted on using his personal savings to cover the loan application fees and penalties that couldn't be recovered through the criminal investigation. His determination to repair the financial damage reflected his commitment to taking responsibility for his part in the crisis. Even though Agent Campbell had assured him that he was legally considered a victim rather than an accomplice, "I signed those papers," Tyler said firmly, when I suggested that his savings should remain untouched. "Jennifer might have lied to me, but I was still the one who put your house at risk. I need to fix what I broke, even if she was the one who broke me first." Tyler's new job came through Harold's business connections, a position with a construction company that appreciated his warehouse experience and welcomed his determination to rebuild his reputation through honest work. The job paid better than his previous position and provided the stability he needed to move forward with confidence in his own judgment. Our relationship deepened as we worked together to repair more than just financial damage. Tyler asked questions about our family history that he had never cared about before, wanting to understand the sacrifices and decisions that had shaped our life together. He listened with new appreciation as I shared stories about his mother's wisdom and her hopes for the man he would become. The most powerful healing moment came when we discovered the letters his mother had written during her final illness, messages intended for Tyler's future milestones that I had saved but never shared. Reading her words about pride in both of us, her hopes for our continued partnership after her death, and her confidence in Tyler's character, helped him understand that Jennifer's manipulation couldn't destroy the foundation his mother had built. "She knew I would make mistakes," Tyler said through tears as he read his mother's letter about learning from failure and growing stronger through adversity. She told me that making mistakes was part of becoming a man, but that running away from consequences was what separated boys from grown men. Patricia became an unofficial member of our healing process, providing perspective from someone who had observed Jennifer's deception without being manipulated by her charm. Patricia's insights helped Tyler understand how sophisticated Jennifer's operation had been, how her manipulation tactics had been designed to isolate him from people who might have recognized her criminal intentions. The community support that emerged during our recovery surprised both Tyler and me. Neighbors who had seemed distant or uninterested in our family situation stepped forward with offers of help, meals, and encouragement that reminded us that isolation was part of Jennifer's strategy rather than our natural social reality. Jennifer's trial provided the final chapter in our family's recovery from her criminal manipulation. Tyler testified about her psychological techniques and their effects on his decision-making, helping prosecutors demonstrate the sophisticated nature of her fraud operation. His testimony was crucial for securing convictions that would prevent Jennifer from victimizing other families. Charles Brennan's cooperation with prosecutors revealed the extent of the organized crime network that had supported Jennifer's operations. His testimony led to arrests in 3 other states and the recovery of assets that could be returned to previous victims who had lost their homes to similar schemes. The federal judge's sentencing statement praised Tyler's courage in cooperating with the investigation, despite the personal cost of admitting his manipulation by someone he had trusted. Jennifer received 15 years in federal prison, a sentence that reflected both the scope of her crimes and the psychological damage she had inflicted on her victims' families. Tyler's romantic recovery took longer than his financial or legal healing. Jennifer's betrayal had damaged his ability to trust his own judgment about relationships, making him cautious about forming new connections with women who might not be who they appeared to be. His growth included learning to recognize healthy relationship dynamics and trust his instincts when something felt manipulative or wrong. The community volunteer work that Tyler began during his recovery led to meeting Sarah, a teacher whose genuine kindness and transparent communication provided a stark contrast to Jennifer's manipulative charm. Sarah's patience with Tyler's cautious approach to romance demonstrated the difference between authentic affection and predatory manipulation. Our family traditions resumed stronger than before, with camping trips and baseball games that carried new meaning after our near loss of each other. Tyler's appreciation for these simple pleasures reflected his understanding that Jennifer had tried to convince him that family bonds were obstacles to success rather than sources of strength and joy. The property deed that I eventually executed, adding Tyler's name as joint owner with rights of survivorship, represented trust rebuilt through adversity rather than simple inheritance. Tyler had earned his place as my partner in family stewardship through his courage in exposing Jennifer's crimes and his commitment to repairing the damage her manipulation had caused. Harold's final legal work for our family included establishing safeguards against future fraud attempts, including powers of attorney that required multiple signatures for major financial decisions and regular reviews by independent counsel. These protections reflected lessons learned from Jennifer's sophisticated attack on our family's vulnerability. The life lesson that emerged from our ordeal went deeper than simple warnings about romantic predators or financial fraud. Tyler and I learned that family relationships require constant nurturing and protection, that taking loved ones for granted creates vulnerabilities that criminals can exploit, and that genuine love sometimes requires difficult conversations and uncomfortable truths. Tyler's wisdom, earned through painful experience, included understanding that independence doesn't require isolation from family support, that financial success built on deception is worthless, and that trust broken through manipulation can be rebuilt stronger than before if both parties are willing to do the necessary work. My own growth included accepting that protecting Tyler meant teaching him to recognize deception rather than simply warning him about specific threats. Jennifer's manipulation succeeded because Tyler lacked experience with sophisticated liars, not because he lacked intelligence or good judgment in general. The community education program that Tyler and I developed with local law enforcement helps other families recognize and resist similar fraud schemes. Our presentations combine Tyler's perspective as a victim with my experience as a target, providing audiences with practical tools for protecting themselves and their loved ones from predatory criminals. Our story ended not with simple victory over evil, but with understanding that families survive and grow stronger through adversity when they maintain communication, trust each other's fundamental goodness, and remember that genuine love always seeks the other person's true welfare rather than selfish advantage. As I sit here today in the house that remained ours through Tyler's courage and our family's resilience, I'm struck by how much stronger our bond became after being tested by Jennifer's sophisticated attack. Tyler learned that wisdom sometimes comes through painful experience, and I learned that trusting my son's fundamental goodness was justified even when his judgment was temporarily compromised. The greatest victory wasn't financial recovery or Jennifer's imprisonment, but Tyler's transformation from a manipulated young man into someone who understands that real success comes from genuine relationships, honest work, and the courage to admit mistakes while learning from them. That transformation is worth more than any property or inheritance I could ever give him. Have you ever had to rebuild trust with someone you love after it was damaged by outside manipulation or misunderstanding? How did you find the patience and wisdom to forgive while still protecting yourself from future harm? Your experiences and insights could help others who are facing similar challenges in their own families. Thank you for listening to our story and allowing me to share the lessons we learned through one of the most difficult periods of our lives. I hope our experience provides encouragement to anyone who feels their family relationships have been damaged beyond repair. With patience, honesty, and commitment to each other's true welfare, even the deepest wounds can heal stronger than before. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to hear more real stories about overcoming life's challenges, and share this message with anyone who might benefit from understanding how families can survive and thrive after betrayal and manipulation. Comments sharing your own experiences or questions are always welcome and help create a community of support for others facing similar struggles.